My name is Whitney Wood, and I was 33 the day a stranger told me I had a daughter. I was in the produce aisle at Harris Market. Squeezing avocados like the firmness of fruit was the most complicated thing I'd faced that week. A woman tapped my shoulder. "Your daughter is beautiful." She smiled. I looked at her. "I don't have a daughter." Her face shifted. "She's been following you since the park." I turned around and saw a little girl I'd never seen before. 5 years old, maybe. Brown hair tucked behind her ears, eyes so familiar it made my stomach drop. She reached up and grabbed my hand like she'd been rehearsing the gesture her whole life. "Can we go home now, Mommy?" I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she came from, but I knew my dead sister's face when I saw it. And my mother had spent 5 years making sure nobody ever would. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary women face the people who underestimated them and answer with patience instead of noise. The folks hawk on you being quiet rarely check whether quiet means weak. Settle in, drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. The woman's name was Pam. Pam Dwyer, mid-50s, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of person who apologized twice before finishing a sentence. She caught up to the girl in the cereal aisle, breathless and flustered, already explaining. "I'm her foster caregiver, temporary placement." She slipped away at the park while I was releasing my shoe. Pam crouched down and tried to coax the girl loose, but the child's fingers stayed locked around mine like a seat belt. "She does this sometimes," Pam said, quieter now. "Finds someone and won't let go. She lost her mom a couple months back." I looked down. The girl was staring at me with an expression I couldn't name. Not fear, not need. Exactly. Recognition. Like I was someone she'd already decided about. "I'm hungry." The girl said, "Can I have strawberry milk?" She said it the way kids say things they've said 1,000 times to a person who always said yes. I didn't have strawberry milk. I didn't have anything for a 5-year-old. But I found myself walking to the dairy case anyway, Pam trailing behind me, the girl's hand still fastened to mine. Pam watched the two of us and went quiet for a long second. Then she looked at the girl's face and she looked at mine. "You too could be." She stopped herself, shook her head. "Sorry, that's none of my business. It should have been a throwaway comment from a stranger in a grocery store. It wasn't." That offhand sentence was the first crack in a wall my family had been building for 5 years. Pam and I sat on the bench outside Harris Market while the girl drank her strawberry milk with both hands, knees pulled up, a purple stuffed elephant wedged under her arm. The elephant was faded and soft, the kind of toy that had survived 1,000 naps and a few rounds in the wash. One ear was stitched back on with thread that didn't match. "That's Plum," Thegirl said without looking up. "He goes everywhere." I nodded like this was perfectly normal. A stranger on a bench talking to a child she just met about a stuffed animal's travel. Pam excused herself to make a call. The girl set down her milk and held Plum out to me, and I took him because I didn't know what else to do. That's when I felt it. A small fabric tag hand-sewn into the seam along the belly. I turned it over, block letters and permanent marker. The ink slightly faded. Leewood. Below the name, a phone number, 10 digits. My thumb stopped on the last name. Wood. I read it again. "Leewood, I have a particular skill set. I'm a forensic accountant. I spend my days tracing numbers that people tried to erase. I noticed patterns, and I was noticing one now. The brown hair, the shape of her jaw, the way she tilted her head when she listened. And her last name, my last name, Lily," I said. She looked up. "That's your name?" She nodded. "What's yours?" "Whitney." She studied me the way kids do when they're deciding if you're safe. "You look like my mommy," she said. Then she went back to her milk. I drove back to my office that afternoon and sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the dashboard clock. My office is a 2-room suite above a sandwich shop on Franklin Street. Would forensic accounting, established 4 years ago with savings I built waiting tables through community college and night school. I like numbers. Numbers don't manipulate you. They don't pick favorites. They either reconcile or they don't. I built the practice alone and I liked it that way. I ate lunch at my desk. I hadn't had a guest over for dinner in 8 months. My apartment was clean because nobody was there to make it dirty. This was the life I'd engineered. Efficient, quiet, answerable to no one, and I was good at it. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number from the tag on Plum. 3 tones, then a recording. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Deadline. I tried a reverse lookup. The number had been registered to a Vanessa Wood at an address in Mill Haven, 40 minutes north. Vanessa, my older sister. The sister who'd stopped returning calls 4 years ago. The sister my mother said had gone off to live her own life and didn't want to be found. The sister whose name made my mother's mouth go tight whenever it came up at Thanksgiving. I typed the name and the address into a search engine. The third result was a funeral home listing, Vanessa Marie Wood, 1989 to 2025. Services held privately, no public memorial. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I went back and read it again because forensic accountants don't panic. We reconcile. I found Vanessa's photo on the funeral home's condolence page. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her cheekbones sharper, but the same half smile she used to give when she thought something was funny and nobody else had caught the joke yet. 36 years old, diagnosed 6 months before she died. Aggressive, fast. The obituary was 4 sentences long and read like it had been written by someone filling out a form. Beloved daughter, cherished sister, preceded in death by her father, Gerald Wood. No children listed. I scrolled to the bottom, read it twice, no children listed. My family had told me, my mother had told me that Vanessa couldn't have children. That there had been a pregnancy years ago that didn't work out and we weren't supposed to bring it up. I'd believed her. I'd believed my mother because that was what I'd been trained to do, accept the version of events she handed me and stop asking questions. I pulled up the photo of Vanessa again and held my phone next to the mental image of Lily in the grocery store. Same brown hair, same jaw, same head tilt. Lily wasn't just a child with my last name. She was a carbon copy of my sister at 5 years old. I'd seen those photos in albums my mother kept on the shelf above the piano. Vanessa at 5 in a sundress, squinting at the camera, one hand holding a popsicle and the other holding mine. I was 2 in that picture, too small to remember. But looking at Lily's face today, I remembered something my body had apparently never forgotten. I closed my laptop. Then I opened it again. I had work to do. I called Pam the next morning. She'd given me her number at the bench, in case you think of anything, and I could tell she'd been expecting me to use it. Pam connected me to Lily's caseworker at the county child welfare office, a woman named Deborah Leeton, who spoke in the careful, measured way of someone who delivered bad news too many times to count. Deborah confirmed what I'd already pieced together. Lily was in emergency foster care. Her mother, Vanessa Wood, had died 10 weeks ago. There was no father listed on the birth certificate. The state was in the process of locating and verifying extended family. I'd like a DNA test, I said. I believe Lily may be my niece. A pause. Then Deborah asked me a question I wasn't ready for. Ms. Wood, are you aware that we already notified the next of kin 7 weeks ago? I sat very still. Who did you notify? The maternal grandmother, Allrain Wood. She confirmed the family relationship. She said she'd coordinate with the other family members. 7 weeks. My mother had known about Lily for 7 weeks. She'd confirmed the relationship. She'd told the state she would handle it, and she hadn't said a word to me. Not at Sunday brunch 3 weeks ago. Not on the phone last Tuesday when she asked me to look at her tax return. Not once. Miss Wood, are you still there? I'm here, I said. I'd like that DNA test, and I'd like to understand why nobody coordinated with me. The results came back in 4 days. I know some people say they knew before the paper confirmed it. I'll be honest. I didn't know. I hoped. But knowing requires evidence, and I don't trust anything without documentation. The report said what numbers say when they stop lying. Aunt and niece, probability of biological relationship greater than 99%. Lily was Vanessa's daughter. Vanessa had a daughter. My sister had a 5-year-old child, and she'd raised her and she'd died, and I'd never known any of it. I sat at my desk with the report in my hands and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I cried. Not the kind of crying you do at movies or funerals, The quiet, chest-locked kind where you realize the story you've been told about your own family was missing an entire person. A child, my niece. For 5 years, Lily had been alive, eating breakfast, learning to tie her shoes, carrying a purple elephant named Plum. And somewhere during all of that, my sister had been sick and scared and alone. I set the report down, lined up the edges with the corner of my desk because that's what I do when I need to think. Then I picked up my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Deborah Leeton at Child Welfare requesting supervised visitation while the guardianship process was sorted out. The second was to my mother. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. I know about Lily. Nobody told me she existed. That ends today. I hung up and opened a new spreadsheet. Column A, what I knew. Column B, what I didn't. Column B was longer. My mother called back the next evening. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about the DNA results. She opened with a sigh so practiced it could have been rehearsed and said, "Whitney, why are you digging this up?" I held the phone away from my ear for a second, looked at the ceiling, put it back. Digging what up? A child? Don't be dramatic. She's 5, Mom. She's real. She's in a stranger's house. Lorraine's voice went flat the way it does when she's decided the conversation is beneath her. I was notified weeks ago. I've been handling it quietly. There's no need for you to get involved. Handling it how? Dean and Sloan are looking into the situation. Dean, my younger brother, 29, 2 maxed credit cards, and a wife who had once Googled, "How much is a foster child stipend at Thanksgiving dinner?" when she thought nobody could see her screen. I knew because I'd been sitting next to her. What does looking into the situation mean exactly? It means your brother has a stable home, 2 parents, a yard. It's better for the child. Her name is Lily. I know her name. Do you? Because 7 weeks ago you could have told me she existed and you chose not to. Silence. Not the silence of someone gathering their thoughts. The silence of someone deciding how much truth to let through. There are reasons I didn't tell you, she said. Reasons that are older than you think. She hung up. I wrote down every word of the conversation on a legal pad. Then I underlined 2 phrases, handling it quietly and older than you think. I didn't sleep well that night, but I reconciled. Deborah Leeton brought me a box of Vanessa's personal effects the following week. Standard procedure, she explained. Belongings that had been collected from the apartment and weren't part of the estate filing. A few books, a pair of reading glasses, a children's drawing of a house with too many windows, and at the bottom, tucked beneath a folded sweater that still smelled faintly of lavender, a cream-colored envelope, sealed on the front, in Vanessa's handwriting, the same looping cursive I remembered from birthday cards she'd sent when I was 12. A single word, Bertie. I set the envelope on my desk and didn't touch it for 3 days. Nobody had called me Bertie since I was 9. It was Vanessa's name for me, invented the summer I broke my arm falling out of a tree, and she told me I'd been trying to fly. She was the only person who ever used it. My mother called me Whitney. My brother called me nothing. Vanessa called me Bertie. And then she stopped calling me anything at all, and I told myself it was because she wanted space. I told myself a lot of things. The envelope sat on my desk next to my keyboard, between my coffee mug and a stack of quarterly filings. And every morning I looked at it. And every morning I decided I wasn't ready. I wasn't afraid of what was inside. I was afraid of what it would confirm. That my sister had been reaching for me from a distance I didn't know existed, and I'd been too trained in my mother's version of reality to notice. On the 3rd night, I poured a glass of water, sat at my kitchen table, and picked up the envelope. But before I opened it, my doorbell rang. Dean and Sloan stood on my porch at 7:45 on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual because Dean hadn't voluntarily visited my apartment in 2 years. Sloan was smiling the way she smiles when she wants something. Too wide, too many teeth. The expression of a woman who'd rehearsed the opening line in the car. "Whitney, we need to talk about the little girl," Sloan said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Dean followed her like a shadow with a mortgage. They sat on my couch. Sloan crossed her legs and launched in. "We've been thinking." Dean and I have a stable home, 2 incomes, a guest room we've already started clearing out. It makes sense for us to take her in. Take Lily in, I said. Right, Lily. Sloane smiled again. Dean said nothing. I waited. Sloane kept talking. School districts, backyard space, the pediatrician they'd already researched. Then she slipped. And of course, there's the house. Vanessa's house in Mill Haven. Someone needs to handle the estate. And if Lily's living with us, it simplifies the she caught herself, recalibrated the logistics. I'd spent 15 years reading financial documents where people buried their real intentions under 3 layers of reasonable language. I knew what logistics meant. It meant the paid-off house in Mill Haven. It meant survivor benefits. It meant the small life insurance policy Vanessa had probably kept for Lily. What about Lily? I asked. What about what she wants? Sloane blinked. Dean studied the carpet. They stayed until Sloane ran out of talking points. In the whole visit, she talked about the house far more than she talked about Lily. I keep thinking about how easy it was for them to file her under a problem, a line item. If you've ever watched your family decide a person's worth by what she might cost them, you already know the cold I felt that morning. Stay with me. This is where I stopped asking permission. After Dean and Sloane left, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and did the thing that comes most naturally to me. I opened my laptop, pulled up the county probate records database, and started building a file, not a feelings file, a facts file. Column A, Lily's birth certificate. Mother listed as Vanessa Marie Wood, father blank. Column B, Vanessa's estate, a house in Mill Haven, a modest life insurance policy, survivor benefits through Social Security for a minor child. Column C, next of kin notification issued to Lorraine Woods 7 weeks prior with a signed acknowledgement of receipt. Column D, Lorraine's failure to notify me. Column E was blank. I labeled it what they don't know I know and left it open. I'm a forensic accountant. When a client brings me a set of books and tells me everything is fine, my job is to find the page where fine stops being true. I'd spent my career reading the math behind other people's lies. This was the first time the lies were in my own family's ledger. I didn't make accusations. I didn't call Dean and Sloane back. I didn't call my mother. I poured myself a second glass of water and I did what I do. I followed the numbers because numbers don't protect anyone's feelings and they don't know how to hide. The next morning, I called a family law attorney named Grace Emery and told her I wanted to petition for temporary guardianship of my biological niece. Grace was methodical direct and charged $400 an hour, which I could afford because I'd been saving money since I was 19, like it was a competitive sport. She filed the petition that afternoon. 2 days later, she called me back with a voice that had shifted from methodical to careful. Whitney, I need you to know something. There's already a petition on file. I sat down. From who? Dean and Sloane Wood filed 6 days ago. Their attorney submitted a home study request and a character reference from. She paused. From your mother. I pressed my thumbnail into the pad of my index finger. A habit from college exams. What does their petition say about me? Grace read the relevant section. Sloane and Dean's filing described me as an unmarried professional with no child care experience, limited family involvement, and the phrase that made me close my eyes, a pattern of emotional distance that raises concerns about her capacity for sustained caregiving. My mother had co-signed that narrative. The woman who hadn't mentioned Lily's existence to me had told a court that I was too distant to raise her. I asked Grace one question. Is there anything in Vanessa's estate records? A will, a guardianship nomination, anything that names a preferred guardian. I'll check fast. I hung up, set my phone on the desk, and looked at the cream-colored envelope still sitting next to my keyboard. Bertie. I was beginning to understand why my sister had addressed it to a name only she used. The first supervised visitation was on a Thursday in a room with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs, and a social worker named Terry who sat in the corner taking notes on a clipboard. Lily walked in holding Plum by one ear. She saw me and stopped. Then she crossed the room and climbed into the chair next to mine like she was returning to a seat she'd reserved. I'd brought strawberry milk, the small carton, the kind with the foil straw. Lily took it without speaking, peeled the straw and drank. After a minute, she said, "Mommy drank this when her hair was falling out." My throat closed. I kept my face steady. "Your mommy liked strawberry milk." Lily nodded. "She drank it every day when she was sick. She said it tasted like being little again." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't have been smaller than what Lily had just offered me. A piece of her mother's dying that a 5-year-old had carried alone. Lily finished the carton and folded it flat the way someone had taught her to. Then she pulled Plum off her lap and set him on mine. "You keep him," she said, "so you won't be scared." Terry looked up from her clipboard. I held the stuffed elephant with both hands and felt the fabric tag against my palm. Leewood. And underneath my sister's handwriting was the faded phone number that had led me here, to this room, to this child, to a truth my family had buried under 5 years of silence. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Plum and the cream envelope and decided I was done being scared of both. I opened the letter. Vanessa's handwriting was smaller than I remembered, the lines tighter, like she was trying to fit a life into 2 pages. "Bertie, if you're reading this, then the thing I was afraid of happened, and I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you while I could still explain it out loud." She wrote that she got pregnant at 31. The father was someone she'd loved briefly and lost permanently. He left before Lily was born and never looked back. When she told our mother, Lorraine gave her 2 options. Give the baby up privately or lose the family. She said a child without a father would humiliate us. She said she'd raised us better than this. She said if I kept the pregnancy, I'd be on my own. Vanessa kept the pregnancy. She moved to Mill Haven. She raised Lily alone, worked as a bookkeeper for a veterinary clinic, and told no one in the family. Our mother told everyone Vanessa had a miscarriage and moved away to recover. I should have called you Bertie. I thought about it every year on your birthday. But Mom said you agreed with her. She said you thought I was selfish. I believed her because it was easier than finding out if it was true. I set the letter down and pressed my hands flat on the table. My mother had told Vanessa that I agreed with her. My mother had told me that Vanessa didn't want contact. Both lies, one wall built from 2 sides. The letter ended with a line I would carry with me into every room I walked into for the next 4 months. I signed papers, Bertie. If something happens to me, find the papers. I named you. I always trusted you. Can we go home now, Mommy? Lily used to ask it every night before bed. Vanessa wrote it down like a prayer she couldn't answer. I called Grace Emery at 7 the next morning. The papers Vanessa mentioned. They exist. I need you to find them. Grace found them in 48 hours, not at the county probate office, but in a box of Vanessa's personal documents that the Mill Haven apartment manager had stored after the lease ended. A notarized designation of standby guardian, nomming me, Whitney, and Wood as Lily's intended legal guardian in the event of Vanessa's death or incapacitation. The document was signed, witnessed, and notarized at a UPS store in Mill Haven by a public notary named David Trent. Ha confirmed the date and Vanessa's identity when Grace's office called. Vanessa had prepared the document, but never filed it with the court. Maybe she ran out of time. Maybe she thought the letter would be enough. Either way, the designation was legally valid once submitted, and Grace submitted it that afternoon. But it was the second page that mattered. Under the section titled Exclusions and Reasons, Vanessa had written a single paragraph. She excluded Lorraine Wood from guardianship consideration. The stated reason, my mother pressured me to relinquish my daughter at birth and has refused to acknowledge my child's existence for 5 years. I do not believe she would act in Lily's best interest. She excluded Dean and Sloan Wood from consideration. The stated reason, my brother and his wife have expressed no interest in my well-being or my daughter's well-being during my illness and have no existing relationship with my child. She named me. The stated reason was 1 sentence. Whitney is the only member of my family who never stopped being kind, even when she didn't know the full story. Grace read me the document over the phone. When she finished, I asked her to read that last line again. She did. This changes the entire case. Grace said the court weighs a parent's documented wishes heavily combined with the DNA and your financial stability. Whitney, this is strong. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my car until the parking meter expired. Then I went back inside and updated column E. Column E was supposed to stay empty until I had something concrete. It didn't stay empty long. The forensic accountant in me had already started pulling threads. Not because I wanted to find something ugly, but because ugly things tend to announce themselves when you look at the numbers long enough. Vanessa's estate was modest. A paid-off house in Mill Haven worth roughly $220,000, a life insurance policy through her employer, $75,000, payable to Lily's guardian, and Social Security survivor benefits for a minor child, approximately $1,600 a month until Lily turned 18. None of this was a fortune, but to someone carrying $40,000 in credit card debt, it was a lifeline with a child attached. I requested the estate account activity from the probate office. What I found was a Form SSA 11, a request for representative pay submitted to the Social Security Administration 4 weeks prior, an application to redirect Lily's survivor benefits to a designated payee. The form had been filed before Lily had a legal guardian, before anyone had custody, before anyone should have been touching that money. The applicant's signature was at the bottom of the form, but the copy I received had the name field redacted pending the probate court's review. Grace said she'd subpoena the unredacted version. I didn't need it yet. I already had a short list of people who knew about Lily's benefits, had motive to access them, and had filed a competing guardianship petition. The list was 2 names long. I put the form in a manila folder, labeled it with a date and a case reference number, and filed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Column E now had an entry, follow the money. My mother called 3 days later and said she was hosting a family discussion about Lily's future at her house on Saturday. She used the word discussion the way diplomats use it before a war. I arrived at 2:00. Lorraine's living room hadn't changed since I was 15. The same cream carpet, the same shelf of photo albums above the piano, the same air of controlled perfection that made you want to whisper Evan when no one was sleeping. Dean and Sloane sat on the love seat. Sloane had brought a binder tabbed, color-coded, labeled Lily's transition plan. My mother sat in the wing-back chair by the window. Deborah Leeton, the caseworker, had been invited by L. Rain under the guise of keeping everyone informed. 2 cousins I barely spoke to hovered near the kitchen. Lorraine opened by saying this was a family matter and should be resolved privately. Then she turned to me. Whitney, I understand you filed a petition. I think we can all agree that Dean and Sloane are better positioned. They have a home. They have each other. She paused. Let the word each other settle like a verdict on my singleness. You've never raised anything but spreadsheets, she said. Someone in the kitchen coughed. Sloane nodded. Dean studied his shoes. Deborah wrote something down. I looked at my mother, at the woman who had told my sister I thought she was selfish, who had told me my sister didn't want contact, who had known about Lily for 7 weeks and chosen silence. And I said nothing. Not because I didn't have words, because I'd learned a long time ago that the person who speaks first in a room full of liars is the person who loses control of the room. I let Lorraine keep talking. I had documents. Documents don't need to interrupt. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. Lorraine talked for 30 of them. Sloane presented her binder. Dean mentioned the school district twice, and then Deborah Leeton asked the only question that mattered. She looked around the room at my mother, at Dean, at Sloane, and said, I need to understand something. Lily's mother died 10 weeks ago. The state notified Mrs. Wood 7 weeks ago. Why was it 7 weeks before any family member initiated contact with the child? The room got quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't mean people are thinking. It means people are deciding who goes first. Nobody went first, so Deborah continued. Additionally, the court will want to know why Miss Whitney Wood, the aunt and individual named in the mother's guardianship designation, was not informed by any family member during that period. Lorraine's jaw tightened. She looked at Dean. Dean looked at his shoes again, and then Lorraine said it. She said it the way you say something you've been thinking for 5 years but never had to defend out loud. That child was never supposed to exist. The room didn't gasp. That's a movie thing. In real life, when someone says the worst possible sentence at the worst possible moment, the room just goes still. Deborah's pen stopped moving. Sloane's mouth opened and closed. I heard a sound from the hallway, a small sound, a shoe on hardwood, and I turned. Lily was standing in the doorway. Pam had brought her 20 minutes early for a scheduled handoff. The meeting was supposed to be done by now, but Lorraine had stretched it, and Pam had let herself in through the side entrance the way she always did for pickups. Nobody had checked. Nobody had thought to. Lily's arms were at her sides. Plum was on the floor where she'd dropped him. I crossed the room in 4 steps, knelt in front of her, and picked her up. I didn't say a word to anyone. I carried Lily out the front door. People assume the quiet one won't fight. They're not wrong about the quiet. They're wrong about the fight. If anyone ever taught you that being calm means being easy, keep watching. The next room I walked into changed everything. I sat in my car with Lily in the back seat, buckled into a booster seat I'd bought the day after our first visitation. She held Plum against her chest and stared out the window without speaking. I didn't fill the silence with reassurance she hadn't asked for. I just drove. When we got back to my apartment, she sat at the kitchen table and I poured her a glass of strawberry milk, the kind in the carton with the foil straw. She drank half of it and said, "That lady said I wasn't supposed to be here." I set my glass down. I heard her. "Is that true?" I pulled a chair next to hers and sat down. "No, it's not true. You are exactly supposed to be here." She considered this the way kids consider things, completely without negotiation. "Okay," she said. Then she finished her milk. That night after Pam came to take Lily back to the foster placement, I sat at my desk and looked at the letter from Vanessa, the guardianship designation from Grace, the estate filings, the representative pay form, and the legal pad where I'd written every word my mother had said. Everything was in front of me. The case was clean. The numbers were solid. The only thing missing was the decision to stop building the file and start using it. I closed my laptop, opened it again, and drafted a 14-page brief for the guardianship hearing. Grace said, "I wrote like a woman who'd been waiting her whole career for the right audit." Grace submitted Vanessa's guardianship designation to the probate court on a Monday. By Wednesday, Dean's attorney called Grace, requesting a copy. By Thursday, Sloane called me directly. "Whitney, let's be reasonable about this." I let the word reasonable sit for a second. I'm listening. "Nobody's saying you don't care about Lily, but a notarized form from Vanessa was sick when she signed that. People make emotional decisions when they're dying. Vanessa was a bookkeeper. I said she made organized decisions. That's how bookkeepers work. But naming you're single. You work constantly. You don't have what I have as a signed and notarized document in which a dingmother named her sister as her daughter's guardian. What I also have is a document in which that same mother specifically excluded your household with reasons." Silence. I could hear Dean in the background whispering something I couldn't make out. "Sloane, I'm going to say this once. She named me, not you. That's not an opinion. It's notarized." Sloane hung up. Grace called me an hour later to tell me the probate court had accepted Vanessa's designation into evidence and scheduled a formal guardianship hearing for 6 weeks out. The hearing would be open, meaning the judge, the case worker, both attorneys, and any interested family members could attend. It would be the first time everything I'd gathered would be in the same room at the same time. I marked the date on my calendar. Then I opened my bottom desk drawer, pulled out the manila folder with the representative pay form, and placed it on top of the stack. Whoever had signed that form was about to have a very public afternoon. Grace got the unredacted version of the representative pay form 3 weeks before the hearing. She called me on a Friday and read me the name on the signature line. Sloan Wood, co-signed by Dean Wood, filed 4 weeks after Vanessa's death, before any custody determination, before any court had appointed a guardian, before anyone had legal authority over a single cent of Lily's money. The form requested that Lily's Social Security survivor benefits, $1,600 a month, be redirected to a bank account held jointly by Dean and Sloan. The stated purpose was interim care expenses for the minor child. Except Dean and Sloan didn't have the minor child. Lily was in foster care with Pam. Dean and Sloan hadn't fed her a meal, attended a doctor's appointment, or bought her a pair of shoes. There were no interim care expenses because there was no interim care. I printed the form. I printed the bank account statement Grace had subpoenaed, which showed 2 deposits matching the benefit amount before the Social Security Administration suspended the pay arrangement pending its own review. I printed the timeline, Vanessa's death, the next Ofkin notification, Sloan's benefits application, Dean's competing guardianship petition, and laid it all out on my desk in chronological order. The pattern was clean. I've audited companies that tried harder to hide their fraud than Dean and Sloan did. They hadn't even used a separate account. I put everything in the manila folder and added a new label. Exhibit D. Grace told me to be careful that family cases get emotional and judges don't like theatrics. I told her I don't do theatrics. I do exhibits. 2 weeks before the hearing, Dean and Sloan's attorney filed a motion claiming that I had exerted undue influence over Lily during supervised visitations and was exploiting a traumatized child's attachment disorder for personal gain. The motion requested that my visitation be suspended pending a psychological evaluation. I read it sitting at my desk at 9 in the morning with a cup of coffee that went cold before I finished the second page. Personal gain. That was the phrase that landed. Not because it hurt. I've read worse things in depositions, but because I knew where it came from. The language was too precise for Dean. The framing was too strategic for Sloan. This was my mother's fingerprint. Lorraine hadn't filed anything herself. She hadn't put her name on a single document since the next of kin acknowledgement, but she'd been in Thurum with Dean's attorney. Grace confirmed this through a filing that listed Lorraine as a consulting family member. Consulting. My mother was consulting on how to keep me away from my dead sister's child. The motion was denied within a week. The judge noted that Lily's case worker had filed positive reports from every supervised visit and that there was no clinical basis for the claims. But the motion had done what it was designed to do. It signaled that this wasn't going to be a clean hearing. They would come at me. They would challenge my fitness. They would use my solitude, my work, my silence as evidence of deficiency. They were counting on me to react, to raise my voice, to give them something messy they could point to and say, "See, she's unstable." I didn't react. I updated the file. The night before the hearing, my mother came to my apartment. She didn't call ahead. She knocked twice and stood in the doorway wearing her good coat. The charcoal one she reserves for church and situations she considers serious. I let her in because you don't leave your 61-year-old mother on a porch in October. Even when she's the reason you haven't slept in 3 days. She sat at my kitchen table. I poured her water. She didn't drink it. I was 19 when I had Vanessa. She said no preamble, no warm-up, just the sentence flat as a tax return. Your father and I weren't married yet. His family wouldn't speak to me for 2 years. My own mother told me I'd ruined the family name. She turned the glass in her hand. I swore I would build something respectable. And I did. 40 years, Whitney. 40 years of being the woman who got it right. And then Vanessa, she stopped, pressed her lips together. Vanessa made the same mistake I did, and I couldn't watch it happen again. I looked at my mother and saw for the first time not the woman who had erased my niece, but the 19-year-old girl who had been erased herself and decided the only way to survive was to make sure it never showed. For 1 second, I understood her. Then the second passed. Mom, she didn't make a mistake. She had a daughter, and you told her to throw that daughter away to protect your reputation. Lorraine's face hardened. I was protecting this family. You were protecting yourself. And now a 5-year-old thinks she was never supposed to exist. She stood up, put on her coat, and left without touching the water. That child was never supposed to exist. The sentence followed me into the courtroom the next morning like a bruise that hadn't faded. I woke at 5, showered, put on the navy blazer I wear to client depositions. Professional, unremarkable, the kind of outfit that says I am not here to perform. I laid out the file on the dining table one last time. Exhibit A, Lily's birth certificate. Mother, Vanessa Marie Wood. Father, not listed. Exhibit B, DNA confirmation. Aunt niece, 99% probability. Exhibit C, Vanessa's notarized designation of standby guardian, nomming me with the exclusion statement and reasons. Exhibit D, the representative pay form signed by Sloan, co-signed by Dean, filed without legal authority, directing Lily's benefits to their joint account. Exhibit E, the state's next of-kin notification to L. Rain, signed and acknowledged 7 weeks before any family member contacted me. Exhibit F, Deborah Leeton's visitation reports. All positive. 6 exhibits, 47 pages, every claim sourced, every date verified, every number reconciled. Grace had reviewed the packet twice and said it was the cleanest guardianship brief filed in 11 years. I didn't feel clean. I felt like a woman about to walk into a room and dismantle her own family with paperwork. But then I thought about Lily in that doorway, arms at her sides, plumb on the floor, hearing her grandmother say she was never supposed to exist. And I picked up the folder, put it in my bag, and drove to the county courthouse. I don't raise my voice. I raise exhibits. The probate courtroom was on the 3rd floor. Wood floors, high windows, a judge's bench that looked like it had settled arguments longer than I'd been alive. I sat down, set my bag on the table, and waited. And Dean and Sloan arrived with their attorney, a man named Craig Phelps, who wore a tie clip and spoke in paragraphs. Lorraine sat behind them in the gallery. Not a party to the case, just a presence. A consultant. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it wasn't empty either. Deborah Leeton sat near the front with her case file. 2 of my cousins had come. The same ones who'd been in Lorraine's kitchen weeks ago. A court reporter, a baif, and Judge Catherine Owens, who looked like she'd been doing this long enough to spot performance from 20 FD. Craig Phelps went first. He painted a portrait of Dean and Sloan as the ideal placement, 2-parent household, community involvement, financial planning, and a genuine desire to provide stability for a child in crisis. He described me as a well-meaning but ultimately unsuitable candidate who lacked the family structure, the child care background, and the emotional availability to raise a 5-year-old. He paused at emotional availability like he was letting the judge taste the phrase. Then he said, "Mood has lived alone for her entire adult life. She has never been responsible for another person's well-being. The child needs a family, Your Honor, not a filing cabinet." Sloan nodded. Dean sat still. Lorraine watched from the gallery with an expression I recognized. The one she wore at church when the sermon confirmed something she already believed. I sat next to Grace with my hands folded on the table and my bag on the floor. I didn't react. I didn't take notes. I didn't shake my head or sigh or shift in my chair. I'd spent my career in rooms where people lied professionally. I knew that the best response to a false audit was a true one. Grace stood and handed the judge a bound copy of our filing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't make a speech. She said, "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a notarized designation of standby guardian, executed by the deceased mother, Vanessa Marie Wood, 3 weeks prior to her death." The courtroom shifted. Craig Phelps leaned forward. Sloane's smile flickered and went out like a bulb. Grace read the designation aloud, the nomming clause, the exclusion of Lorraine with reasons, the exclusion of Dean and Sloan with reasons. Then she read the line that Vanessa had written at the bottom of the document. "Whitney is the only member of my family who never stopped being kind. Even Wench didn't know the full story." Grace let the sentence settle before continuing. She entered the DNA results. She entered the birth certificate. She entered Deborah Leeton's visitation reports. Then she showed the court the state's next of-kin notification, Exhibit E, and asked a single question. Your Honor, Lorraine Wood received and signed this notification 7 weeks before any family member contacted my client. During that entire period, Mrs. Wood did not inform her daughter Whitney that a biological niece existed and was in state custody. We asked the court to consider why. Judge Owens looked at the gallery. Lorraine sat with her hands in her lap, perfectly still, the way she always sat when she wanted people to believe she was calm. But I knew my mother, and I knew the difference between her calm and her control. One of them was about to break. Grace entered Exhibit D, the representative pay form, Sloane's signature, Dean's co-signature, the request to redirect a 5-year-old orphan survivor benefits to their joint bank account. Grace walked the judge through it the way I would have walked a client through a suspicious general ledger. No emotion, just sequence. The respondents filed this form 4 weeks after the child's mother died. Grace said at that point, no court had appointed a guardian. No individual had legal authority over the child's finances. 2 deposits reached their personal account before the Social Security Administration flagged the arrangement and suspended payments. Craig Phelps objected. Judge Owens overruled. Grace turned to the gallery. A family member told a caseworker in this room that this child was never supposed to exist. That same family knew the child existed. Knew she was alone and chose not to tell the one person her mother trusted. While my client was finding out she had a niece in a grocery store, the respondents were filing paperwork to access that niece's money. The courtroom was quiet. Lorraine stood up. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for the judge. She stood up in the gallery and said loud enough for the court reporter to catch it. This is what happens when you let people dig into things that should have stayed buried. Judge Owens said, "Ma'am, sit down." Lorraine didn't sit. I did what any mother would do. I protected my family from a situation that should never have. "Ma'am, sit down." Sloane was crying. Dean stared at the table. Lorraine finally sat, but the damage was already in the transcript. Grace asked me if I had anything to add. I stood. I didn't grip the table. I didn't take a breath for effect. I just stood the way I stand in depositions, straight, still like the numbers on the page in front of me. Your Honor, I'm a forensic accountant. I own my practice. I own my home. I have no debt. I'm telling you this not because money is the point, but because money is exactly the point for the people sitting across from me. I looked at the judge. Vanessa's estate includes a house, a life insurance policy, and survivor benefits for Lily. I don't want any of it. I'm requesting that the court authorize the creation of a protected trust for Lily managed by an independent fiduciary with every dollar designated for her education, her health care, and her future. The fiduciary handles disbursements for Lily's expenses. I don't control the principal, and I don't benefit from a cent of it. The money is hers. I paused, not for drama, because the next part mattered more than anything I'd said in a courtroom in my life. My sister raised her daughter alone for 5 years because our family told her that child was a disgrace. My sister is gone, but she left a document that says she trusted me. She left a letter that says she loved me. And she left a little girl who walked into a grocery store and grabbed my hand because she recognized something in my face that her own grandmother tried to erase. I looked at Lorraine. I looked at Dean. I looked at Sloane. Then I looked back at the judge. She has a family now, it's me. I sat down. Grace put her hand on my arm. Across the table, Craig Phelps closed his binder. Judge Owens didn't keep us waiting long. She reviewed the designation. She reviewed the exclusions. She reviewed the DNA, the visitation reports, and the representative pay form. Then she ruled temporary guardianship of Lilywood was granted to Whitney Anwood, effective immediately with a review hearing in 6 months for permanent status. The court ordered an independent investigation into the unauthorized benefits application filed by Dean and Sloane Wood. The court recommended that any proceeds from Vanessa's estate be placed in a protected trust per my request pending fiduciary appointment. She said one more thing before adjourning. The court notes that the deceased mother took deliberate, documented steps to designate a guardian for her child. The court gives significant weight to a parent's expressed wishes. This child was not forgotten. She was planned for. Sloane left first. She walked out without looking at Dean, which told me more about their marriage than anything in their filing. Dean followed her, hands in his pockets, the posture of a man who understood he'd lost something bigger than a custody case. Lorraine sat in the gallery for a long moment after the room emptied. She looked at me once. I expected anger. I expected another speech. Instead, she picked up her purse, straightened her coat, and walked out through the side door. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't say anything. It went into the hallway. Lily was sitting on a bench with Pam, swinging her legs, holding Plum by one ear. She saw me and slid off the bench. I knelt down. She put her hand on my face, the way kids do when they're checking if someone is real. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. The months that followed were quieter than the ones before them, which was fine by me. Lily moved into the second bedroom of my apartment, the room I'd been using as a filing archive, which tells you everything about my priorities before she arrived. I bought a bed shaped like nothing in particular, because Lily said she didn't want a theme. She wanted a bed. She wanted a nightlight. She wanted strawberry milk in the refrigerator at all times. The small cartons with the foil straw, and I kept a case of them on the bottom shelf where she could reach without asking. Dean paid back the survivor benefits that had been deposited into his account. His attorney negotiated a repayment plan. The state opened a separate inquiry into whether Sloane's application constituted benefits fraud. The investigation was ongoing, and I heard from Grace that their marriage was not surviving the paperwork. Lorraine kept her distance. I didn't block her number. I didn't ban her from Lily's life. I told her through Grace that she could see Lily under supervised conditions if she could demonstrate consistent, respectful behavior over a period of 6 months. You can be her grandmother. I said, if you can be a kind one, but you don't make decisions for her anymore. Not about her name, not about her story, not about whether she was supposed to exist. She hadn't responded yet. I wasn't holding my breath. Some reconciliations take years, some never happen. I was learning to be okay with both. One evening in November, 3 months after the hearing, I was washing dishes and Lily was coloring at the kitchen table. The apartment smelled like the pasta I'd overcooked and the strawberry milk she'd spilled on her placemat and wiped up herself badly with a paper towel. It was the kind of evening that would have bored me a year ago. Now it was the best part of my day. Lily put down her crayon and walked over to me. She was holding Plum. She'd carried that elephant through foster care, through a grocery store, through a courtroom, through every room she'd entered since her mother died. She held him up and set him on the counter next to the dish rack. "You can keep him now," she said. "I don't need him to be brave anymore." I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, looked at the purple elephant with the hand-sewn tag. Lilywood, the tag that had started everything in a grocery store on a Tuesday when a stranger tapped my shoulder and changed my life. "You sure?" I said. She nodded. Then she looked up at me with my sister's eyes and said, "Can we go home now, Mommy?" She'd said it in a grocery store to a woman she didn't know. She'd said it in Vanessa's letter, asked every night before bed. And now she was saying it standing in her own kitchen, in her own home to the person who was never going to let anyone tell her she wasn't supposed to be here. "We're already home," I said. She went back to her coloring. I put Plum on the shelf above the stove next to the framed photo of Vanessa I'd hung the week Lily moved in. The photo was from the album at my mother's house, Vanessa at 5, squinting in a sundress. Next to it, Lily's school picture from September. Same face, same eyes, same head tilt, different story. I spent my whole life proving I didn't need anyone, building a career out of order, an apartment out of silence, a reputation out of being the person who never asked for help. And a 5-year-old taught me that family isn't who shares your blood quietly. It's who shows up loudly when it counts. That's my story. One stranger in a grocery aisle. One little girl who already knew where home was. and one family that learned a child is not a debt to be assigned. If this reminded you that family is who shows up, hug the person who showed up for you. Share this with someone who needs it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.